You're not paying for food anymore. You're paying for packaging, habit, and a lot of empty space. If you've ever picked something up in a supermarket, looked at the price, and thought, how on earth is this worth that? This video is for you. Because some of the most overpriced foods in the UK aren't luxury items. They're everyday things people buy without thinking. And that's exactly why they get away with it. This isn't about inflation. Inflation is real, but it doesn't explain why so many products feel lighter, thinner, smaller, or less filling than they used to while costing more every year. What we're talking about here is value, or more accurately, the lack of it. Some of the foods on British supermarket shelves today are mostly air, water, filler, or padding, and yet they're priced like they're giving you something substantial. Tall boxes with hardly anything inside. Tubs that look full but weigh nothing. Products that cost more than ever while offering less than they did 10 years ago. And the worst part is, most people blame themselves. They think they're misremembering. They think their appetite changed. They think it's just how things are now. But once you actually look at what you're buying, how much you get, what's in it, and how fast it disappears, the problem becomes obvious. This video isn't about telling you what to eat. It's about exposing where your money is going and why so many supermarket foods feel like bad deals even before you get them home. We're going to break down the UK's most overpriced supermarket foods, explain what they used to offer, what you actually get now, and why the price makes no sense anymore. By the end of this, you'll understand why shopping feels more expensive without feeling more rewarding, and why you're not imagining any of it. At first glance, it feels like everything in the supermarket has just got more expensive. You hear about fuel costs, transport, global problems, and you're told prices have to go up. Fair enough. But that explanation only works up to a point. Because when prices go up, you expect something to stay the same somewhere else. The size, the quality, the amount of food you actually get. And that's where things stop adding up. Over the last few years, a strange shift has happened. Food prices have climbed steadily, but the food itself has quietly shrunk, thinned out, or been padded with cheaper ingredients. So you're not just paying more, you're paying more for less. Sometimes a lot less. This is the challenge most people don't realize they're dealing with. Supermarkets haven't just raised prices. They've redesigned food to look like it hasn't changed. Boxes are taller, packaging is thicker, portions are spread out. A product that looks full on the shelf might be half air once you open it at home. And because the packaging still looks familiar, your brain assumes the value is still there. This didn't happen overnight. It couldn't have. If supermarkets suddenly halved the amount of food in a product, people would notice and kick off. So instead, the changes were small. A few grams here, a slightly thinner layer there, a bit more water, starch, or filler doing the heavy lifting. Most people only notice when the product is gone quicker than expected. Another part of the problem is convenience. A lot of these overpriced foods survive because they're easy, you're tired, you're busy, you want something quick. And companies know that in those moments, you're not standing in the aisle, calculating value for money. You're reaching for what you recognize. That's where the real challenge sits. These products aren't overpriced because they're fancy. They're overpriced because they've learned they can charge more without giving you more, as long as they don't push too far, too fast. And when something feels slightly disappointing rather than outrageously bad, people accept it. They complain quietly, they joke about it, then they buy it again next week. In this video, we're going to look at the foods where that gap between price and substance has become impossible to ignore. The ones where you're not paying for food so much as shape, branding, and habit. Once you see how this works, it becomes very hard to unsee. And that's when shopping starts to feel different. To really understand how overpriced supermarket food became normal, you have to look at how value slowly got separated from price. Years ago, price and substance were closely linked. If something cost more, it usually gave you more food, better ingredients, or at least a sense that you were paying for something real. That connection hasn't disappeared completely, but it's been stretched thin, so thin that in some cases it's snapped altogether. What's happening now is more subtle. Instead of charging you more for better food, many products charge you more for appearance. A box looks bigger, so you assume there's more inside. A tub feels solid, so you expect it to be filling. A brand name carries trust, so you stop questioning the value. None of those things guarantee substance anymore. One of the biggest tricks is space. Food is spread out to look generous. Bags are puffed up with air, trays are deeper but less full. You don't realize how little you've bought until you get home and open it. By then, the money is already gone. Another issue is dilution. Water is cheap, starch is cheap, fillers are cheap. When real ingredients are reduced and replaced with these, the product still looks like food, still tastes okay, but delivers far less nutrition and satisfaction. You end up eating more, sooner, or adding extras just to feel full. That's not accidental. Then there's the speed factor. Many of the most overpriced foods are designed to be eaten quickly. Soft textures, light portions, products that disappear in minutes. When something goes fast, you don't have time to notice whether it was actually worth the price. Convenience plays a huge role here. These foods survive because they fit into busy lives. They're quick to prepare, easy to grab, and familiar. When you're tired, you don't want to think about value per gram. You want something that feels easy. And supermarkets know this. That's why so many overpriced foods sit right at eye level, near checkouts, or in meal solution sections. They're placed where decisions are rushed. The price feels high, but not high enough to stop you. Another part of the problem is comparison. It's hard to compare value across different formats. A tall box next to a flat one. A premium-looking pack next to a plain one. Your brain fills in the gaps and assumes the higher price means more food or better quality. Often, it doesn't. In this video, we're not looking at rare treats or luxury items. We're looking at everyday foods where the price has drifted far away from what's actually inside. Foods that people buy again and again, not because they're good value, but because they've become part of routine. And once routine takes over, overpriced stops feeling shocking, it just feels normal. That's what we're about to unpack, one food at a time. Food number 10, ready-to-eat pasta pots. This is where the ripoff starts quietly. Pasta pots look like a full meal. They're warm, filling, and positioned as something you can eat on the go. They cost nearly as much as a proper lunch, so your brain assumes there must be something substantial inside. Then you open one. Most of what you've paid for is sauce and air. The pasta portion is small, the protein, if there is any, is tiny, and the sauce does most of the work, hiding how little solid food you're actually getting. You finish it quickly and feel oddly unsatisfied, like you've eaten something but not really had a meal. These pots survive because they're convenient. You're paying for speed, not value. But once you realize how little pasta is actually in there, it's hard not to notice how fast the pot empties compared to the price. And if this feels familiar, wait until you see how this trick works with something even more basic. Food number 9, branded breakfast bars. Breakfast bars are sold as fuel, energy, something to keep you going. They're priced like a smart choice, often costing more than a full breakfast if you add them up over a week. But take one out of the wrapper, and it's gone in 3 bites. They're light, soft, mostly sugar and binding agents holding small bits together. The packaging promises filling power, but the reality is a snack that barely touches hunger. That's why people often eat 2, and that's where the price really bites. You're not paying for nourishment here. You're paying for convenience wrapped in health language. And once you notice how fast they disappear, it becomes clear you're buying expensive mouthfuls, not meals. Now let's look at something people think is good value because it looks big. Food number 8, family-size crisps. Big bags, loud packaging, sharing size, except you open them and realize half the bag is air. Crisps have become one of the clearest examples of paying for space instead of food. The bags feel large, but the actual weight inside is surprisingly low. The price has crept up steadily, while the amount of crisps hasn't kept pace. You're not paying for potatoes, you're paying for branding, shelf presence, and that moment of opening a big bag, even though it empties far quicker than it should. Once you clock this, you start noticing how often air is doing the heavy lifting. And it doesn't stop with snacks. Food number 7. Premium sandwiches. These are the ones wrapped in clear plastic, stacked neatly, and priced like a treat. At first glance, they look generous. Thick bread, plenty of filling visible at the front. But open one up, and the truth is usually hiding in the middle. Thin layers, gaps, a lot of bread doing most of the work. You're paying for presentation. The front half looks packed. The rest is mostly structural support. That's not an accident. It's design. The price suggests a proper meal. The reality often feels closer to a snack with good lighting. And once you've spotted this trick, it becomes hard not to notice it elsewhere, especially in foods that claim to be premium. Food number 6. Premium yogurts. Glass pots, thick labels, words like luxury and indulgent. Then you finish 1 in 4 spoonfuls. Premium yogurts are sold as something special, but the portions are tiny. You're paying for texture, branding, and the feeling of treating yourself. Nutritionally, many aren't much different from cheaper options, but they cost significantly more per gram. They don't fill you up, they don't last, and yet they feel expensive enough that you assume they must be worth it. This is where price stops reflecting food and starts reflecting image. And nowhere is that clearer than with food that's meant to replace cooking altogether. Food number 5. Ready meals marketed as healthy. These are often the worst offenders. They cost more than standard ready meals but give you less. Smaller portions, lighter textures, lots of sauce and grains, not much protein. They're sold on the idea that eating less is somehow better, even when it leaves you hungry an hour later. The price makes you think you're investing in yourself. But when you look closely, you're often paying more for fewer calories and less satisfaction, dressed up as virtue. And because they're framed as a good choice, people rarely question the value. But the biggest ripoffs aren't always the ones shouting about health. Sometimes they're the ones hiding in plain sight. Food number 4. Branded cereal boxes. Cereal boxes have grown taller and thinner. They look impressive on shelves, but open one and the inner bag tells a different story. The price has climbed, the contents have shrunk, and the serving sizes on the side quietly suggest eating far less than most people actually do, which means a box that looks like it should last a week barely makes it through a few breakfasts. You're paying for cardboard, branding, and habit. Not much else. And once you realize how fast a box disappears compared to its cost, you start to question why it ever felt like good value. Which brings us neatly to food that disappears even faster. Food number 3. Branded ice cream tubs. Ice cream tubs look generous, big, round, and comforting. But modern ice cream is often whipped full of air. That's why it feels light, soft, and melts quickly. You're paying for volume, not weight. The tub looks big. The actual amount of ice cream is much smaller than it appears. The price, of course, reflects the tub, not the content. Once you've had a few spoonfuls and hit the bottom sooner than expected, the illusion breaks. You've paid a premium for air with flavor. And if you think that's cheeky, wait until you see how this works with something people buy every week. Food number 2. Pre-prepared fruit pots. Fruit should be simple, affordable, straightforward. But chop it up, put it in plastic, and suddenly it costs triple the price. You're paying for convenience, yes, but also for waste. Small portions, lots of juice, very little actual fruit. They look fresh, but you're often getting less than you'd think for the money. They're priced like a snack, but deliver very little satisfaction. And because they're seen as healthy, people don't question the value. This is where the price gap really starts to feel insulting. And finally, we reach the food that sums all of this up. Food number 1, meal deal. Main items. On paper, they're great value. In reality, they're often the worst example of paying for air, filler, and compromise. Sandwiches with thin fillings, pasta pots with more sauce than substance, wraps padded with leaves and little else. Everything is designed to hit a price point, not fill you up. The deal feels cheap, the food feels light, and that's how the system works. You feel like you saved money even though you didn't get much for it. This is the final trick: making overpriced food feel like a bargain by bundling it. Once you see that, the whole picture snaps into focus. And that's exactly where the real story begins. At this point, the pattern should be impossible to ignore. These foods aren't overpriced because they're special. They're overpriced because the meaning of value has quietly changed. Somewhere along the way, price stopped being tied to how much food you get, or how filling it is, or how long it lasts, and started being tied to how it looks, how fast you can eat it, and how little you question it. That's the key moment. You're not paying for food anymore. You're paying for convenience, familiarity, and the illusion of substance. Once you see that, everything else makes sense. Why portions feel smaller even when the price goes up. Why you finish something and still feel hungry. Why food disappears faster than you expect. Why you keep thinking, that wasn't worth it, but still buy it again next week. This didn't happen because supermarkets are evil or because people are stupid. It happened because the system learned exactly how far it could push without causing a backlash. If food became obviously bad, people would stop buying it. But if it becomes slightly disappointing, just light enough, just thin enough, people adapt. Disappointment is quiet, anger is loud. Quiet is easier to manage, so products are designed to be acceptable, not satisfying. Soft textures, lots of sauce, air-filled packaging, small, solid portions, things that feel like meals but don't act like meals. You eat them quickly, move on, and blame yourself for still being hungry. And supermarkets know this works because most shopping is done on autopilot. You're tired, you're busy, you're not standing there doing maths, you're reaching for what's familiar and hoping it'll do the job. That's why branding matters more than substance now. A trusted name can carry a product long after the value has gone. A tall box can distract from a small portion. A deal can hide how little you're actually getting. This is also why so many people feel like food shopping has become unsatisfying, not just expensive. You spend more money and walk away with less confidence that it was worth it. That feeling isn't in your head. It's the result of a system that rewards shaving grams, adding air, and charging for ease rather than nourishment. The turning point is realizing that none of this is accidental, and that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because the moment you stop assuming price equals value, the shelves start to look very different. When you step back and look at everything together, the real issue isn't that food is expensive, it's that so much of it is bad value, and that's a very different problem. People expect prices to go up over time. That's normal. What isn't normal is paying more and walking away with food that feels lighter, emptier, and less satisfying than it used to. That gap between price and substance is what's driving so much quiet frustration, even if people don't always have the words for it. Nothing we've talked about here is rare or hidden. These are everyday foods, things people buy every week without thinking. That's exactly why this works. When something becomes routine, it stops being questioned. You don't stop in the aisle and ask whether a cereal box is mostly cardboard or whether a meal will actually fill you up. You trust the shape, the brand, the price tag, and for a long time that trust was deserved. But the system changed. Food became more about speed, scale, and appearance than nourishment. Portions shrank quietly. Air and water did more of the work. Packaging got smarter. Prices crept up just slowly enough to avoid pushback. The result isn't outrage, it's disappointment. That's the worst part. You don't feel angry enough to stop buying, you just feel a bit let down, a bit unsatisfied, and then you move on. What matters is understanding that this isn't your fault. You didn't suddenly start eating more, you didn't imagine food tasting better before, you didn't forget how filling a proper meal feels. The products changed. Once you accept that, something useful happens. You stop blaming yourself. You stop assuming that higher price means better value. You start noticing how fast things disappear, how light they feel, how often you're hungry again soon after eating. That awareness doesn't mean you have to cook everything from scratch or never buy convenience food again. It just means you're choosing instead of drifting. You're spotting when something isn't worth it. You're deciding where your money actually goes. And that's the real takeaway. Overpriced food survives on autopilot. The moment you switch that off, even briefly, the shelves look very different. Some products stop making sense, some deals don't feel like deals anymore, and suddenly, spending less can feel more satisfying than spending more. You don't need to overhaul your shopping overnight. Just noticing is enough to start. If you want to keep going, watch the next video.